Right. My name is Mike Griffin. I work with Brenna on this campaign for counter recruitment, and this is the first of, we hope, many coffee houses, the Opt-Out Coffee House, and the first group that played, you guys were awesome. We want to have you guys back, and keep playing with this is great. Another thing we have up there is we have a poster, which you can feel free to take one and use it to help in this campaign. It says, before you enlist, think about this. I want to tell a quick story. Part of my work and the way I've gotten into this is by being a counselor on something called the GI Rights Hotline. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but the GI Rights Hotline is a number, a nationwide number that soldiers can call who are in the military and who often are desperately seeking a way to get out. And we get many, many calls a day. Nationwide, there's hundreds of soldiers each day who are trying to get out of this war. And just today, as we were doing all the planning for tonight and an event we're going to have tomorrow, which I'll tell you about in a moment, I got a call from a guy I had been working with, an Army reservist who's been in for 7.5 years in the Army Reserves and only has 6 more months to go. But because of a policy by the Pentagon called the stop-loss order, his unit has been deployed to Iraq. And he had been a reservist and went through his drills, but he said, you know, there comes a time when you just know you can't do something. And something in his conscience was pricked, and he said, I can't go. And he doesn't want to go off to a foreign land and kill people. And so he didn't know what to do. And he decided to go AWOL. And this is about a month ago. And he went AWOL, and there's a process, and that's part of what the GI Rights Hotline does, is we tell soldiers who are AWOL, well, here's what you do to turn yourself in and to get your discharge. And he did, and today was the day he was supposed to get a discharge, and he called me. Actually, his father is the first one who called me, frantic, because he was being taken by military escort and forcibly put onto a plane to join his unit at a base near Indianapolis called Camp Atterbury, where they are going to be flown to Iraq. And so this is in the United States of America, a supposedly all-volunteer army, where a soldier who I'm working with, and this is just one of many, is basically being forced against his will to go off and fight this war. So if he would have known just a little bit of what he was getting into, he never would have enlisted. He was a high school student, and he had military recruiters calling him. He had them come to their lunch period. He saw the chin-up contest and the push-up contest and the free giveaways and all that. And he bought it, and he signed up. And now he's going to be sent to Iraq. Perhaps he has to kill or to die. And so that's why this counter-recruitment campaign is extremely important. Posters like this, which basically says things like, the military wants you for war. Their priority is not your career. I take calls in our office every day from people who say, well, I thought I could get a free education and learn computers. And next thing you know, I'm told that I'm going to be driving a truck in Iraq. So things like the fact that 1 in 5 Iraq war vets reports being responsible for a civilian death. Do military recruiters tell folks that you may have to kill someone? 1 in 6 has post-traumatic stress disorder. All these things, and you as high school students especially, can be the ones to educate your peers. Rebecca Cleveland has 373 students who have opted out. God only knows how many lives she saved, this one young girl, by doing that. And so we hope in the coming months that more students like the ones who are gathered here can continue and keep up this effort, because really this is a battle, and it's a battle to save people's lives, but also to save their consciences. So that's why we're here tonight, to get to know each other. and to hear some stories. I now have the privilege of introducing one of our main speakers, actually our main speaker for tonight, someone who has come to know this terrain of war and conscience far better than perhaps any of us, especially the younger generations in this room. He's an Iraq War vet. He served as an interrogator after being trained in Arabic. He was an interrogator of insurgents at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. He's going to talk to you a little bit about what that was like, and then where that led him in terms of his decision to apply to be a conscientious objector. We've gotten to know him in the past year. He's become a good friend of ours. Has made a couple of trips to South Bend. Is going to be speaking again tomorrow. But tonight, he's going to share his experience of war, his experience of being a soldier, his experience of being recruited, and his experience of having a conscience that came to say, I can't do this. And human beings aren't meant for war. They're meant for greater things. So without further ado, I'm going to call him now Josh Casteel.
Good evening, everybody. I want to keep things as informal as possible, so I just plan on telling a story. And when I'm done, I'd like to open it up just for a conversation. Perhaps I could take some questions. I'm going to be giving the very abridged version of the story because I could go on and on into lots of details, so I want to leave enough time to be able to have a conversation. I'm going to tell you the end of the story first, and Griff gave it away a little bit, but I was an interrogator, an Arabic linguist at Abu Ghraib, a prison of West Baghdad. My unit was sent to Iraq after the scandal broke, basically to clean the prison up. We were supposed to be the change of the guard and to provide the new face of Abu Ghraib. And there's the short of the end of the story, and I'll tell the real story. So we'll go rewind. I come from a very patriotic, conservative, Midwestern home. My grandfather fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. My father was an Army captain. My aunt served in the Army as well. And I first had conversations with recruiters when I was 15 or 16 years old. But based upon where I came from, I didn't really have to talk to them in great detail in order to understand where I was going and what I planned to do with my life. I remember sitting on my dad's knee, probably about 4 years old, looking through photo albums. And I'd look and wonder at just like the mysteries of this photograph. I'd see a man with a funny mustache on his face, gold bars on his collar, standing next to a woman that I recognized, and two tiny little girls. I wasn't born yet, so I got to look at these pictures of my dad when he was an Army captain, when he was, at that time, a lieutenant. And I'd stay up at night and ask him to tell me stories of when he had been a soldier, and to tell me about Grandpa, when Grandpa had fought in the Great War. And as I grew and thought to myself what kind of a man I want to be, I thought back to those stories. I thought of men of courage who had done things like fought Hitler and the Khmer Rouge. People who had been called to go out into the world and to fight evil when it creeps up. People that were willing to lay down their lives in the name of something. And so when I started thinking about what I wanted to do with my life, I thought that's what I want to do. I want to be that kind of man. I want to be the kind of person who protects people and who fights evil. And I was pretty good in school. I did well in things like athletics. And so somewhere in my 4-year time in high school, I decided that I wanted to apply to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And I was on the path of success, of making that happen. I graduated valedictorian in my high school, was most likely for everything. It was pretty terrible stuff. And I decided, though, that one thing that would help my chances of getting into the academy would be to enlist in the Army Reserves. I figured I'm already going to go down this path anyway. I know that I'm going to be in the military, and if I can show the academy, not only am I good in school and sports and everything, but I'm also a soldier already, there's no way they're going to turn me down. And so, 38 days after I turned 17, I went to the Army recruiter and signed up for what's called the Delayed Entry Program. And another program in the Army is called it's called Split Option, which is when you do your combat training between the summer of your junior and senior year of high school. And then after you finish high school, you go back for your advanced training in whatever skill you end up being trained at in the Army. So, 38 days after I turned 17, I go to the recruiters and they take me to Des Moines, which is the military entrance processing station in the state of Iowa. And for the first time in my life, I signed my name to an oath, swearing that I was going to follow through with a specific duty. I went back to high school, finished my junior year, and in the summer of 1997, 17 years old, I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for combat training. And one story I'd like to tell about combat training is going out to the bayonet assault course. All soldiers have to go through this basic combat training, and the bayonet is the knife that you put on the end of a rifle. We go out to the bayonet assault course and we learn how to use our bayonets, and there are dummies out throughout the field, and there's a bayonet assault course where you have to go and jump over sticks and roll around in the dirt and thrust your bayonet into dummies, and it's really kind of fun. But there's a part of it that really isn't fun at all. And before you go out to learn how to use your bayonet, the drill sergeants gather up all the soldiers and they put us into bleachers. And the drill sergeant comes out and he says, "What's the spirit of the bayonet?" And all of us yell, "Kill, kill, kill without mercy, Sergeant." And he says, "What makes the green grass grow?" And we say, "Blood, blood, bright red blood, Sergeant." I came from a pretty conservative Christian household, and that had been the first time in my life I'd ever yelled "kill, kill, kill" and "blood, blood, blood." I couldn't say it every time. That the drill sergeants would rev us up and get us ready to learn how to thrust our bayonets into dummies that are shaped like humans. I didn't really put a whole lot of thought to it. I just thought, I was raised with a certain ethic, and I'm not supposed to like things like killing, but maybe that just has to happen. Maybe I need to learn how to get used to this. So I kind of put it on the back burner, and I finished combat training. I went back to high school, and I got my appointment to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And so instead of going back to receive my advanced training with the Army Reserves, I became a cadet and joined what's called the Long Gray Line. And the U.S. Military Academy is a very special place. It's absolutely gorgeous. Statues adorn the academy grounds. It's a place where the blades of grass stand at attention. It's at the most picturesque point of the Hudson River. And we did lots of things on a daily basis that reminded us of just how cool of a place this is and what kind of ranks we had joined. The people who had come before us were people like General MacArthur and General Eisenhower and George Patton. Like iconic leaders of America. And so this was a very proud moment for all of us. One thing that happened during my senior year of high school, I had this fabulous teacher who started opening up worlds to me in literature. And I started learning how to express myself better in things like writing. And the year before, when I'd been at combat training, and I had that experience of knowing kill, 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 and blood, 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 and not necessarily knowing how to process that, I was starting to gather some of the tools to learn how to put more words to my thoughts. And some of the things that we did at the academy kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But I was still kind of figuring things out. And the one story I'll tell you about West Point was an exercise we had in an English class. I know I'm kind of jumping a lot of ground and getting to this story, but I'm trying to find the huge points to give. In this exercise we had in an English class, we went out into the courtyard and we're supposed to write poetic descriptions of statues. So all the cadets in my English class, we filed out of our classroom and made a little 90-degree formation around the statue of George Patton. And we were asked to write poetic descriptions of George Patton. So we finished that exercise, we went back into the classroom, and we wrote our poems on our personally assigned chalkboards, and all the cadets read their poems, and I was the very last cadet to read mine out loud. And all of the poems that were read went something kind of like this. Pride streams from undaunted eyes in a gaze of patriotic victory. And then my turn came, and mine did not sound like that. My poem was something like, it's really kind of melodramatic, I want to say that up front. It went something like, pride dies with withering youth, and vain ambition falls to the floor, and all the eyes in the room just locked on me. And jaws drop, and it was kind of like one of those Sesame Street moments, you know, like one of these things does not belong here. And I had to ask myself, what are you doing here? I'd already gone through combat training, and so the military stuff was nothing new to me, but there was something just about the environment, the culture, and some of the things that had developed during my last year of college where I wanted to go off and study literature, and I wanted to read philosophy, and I wanted to be able to, you know, like go to cafes at night and have a college experience. And so I spent one more week at the academy, most of my time with the chaplain, trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do with myself. And a week later I was gone, but before I was able to leave, I had to appear before the regimental commander. Leaving the academy is a lengthy ordeal. It's almost as lengthy as applying for conscientious objection, not quite. But you have to go through a series of counseling sessions from your squad leader, who's a fellow cadet, all the way up to the regimental commander, who's a full bird colonel. And I went before the colonel, and he had me stand at attention in front of him for 15 minutes as he berated me, telling me that I was a substandard individual, I had never had the makings of an officer, even though I've been actually commended quite a few times for my skills in lots of different duties. And for a person who's kind of used to doing things well, I had no idea what was going on. And why? Because I was making a certain choice about what I wanted to do with my life. Why he was just attacking me. And I left the academy in all sorts of confusion, and I went to the University of Iowa to study. And I still had in my mind, though, that I wanted to become an officer. That heritage that I received from my family was still very prominent to me. And so I did ROTC for my first year at the University of Iowa. And when I arrived at the University of Iowa, it was Iowa versus Iowa State. Huge rivalry at the University of Iowa. I show up, and okay, so if I thought that I was in a weird place when I was at West Point, I show up to Iowa, and it's like animal carcasses and beer cans and vomiting people everywhere, because this is the big day for Iowa football. And so at West Point, I'm like, what am I doing here? And I go to Iowa, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And so I'm trying to make the best of what I have at the time. A lot of the schools that I applied to, the admissions deadlines had passed, housing was full, and so I was determined to make this work. And so I did ROTC, and I applied myself as much as I could. And two things happened at the end of this year. I was given an award called the Sons of the American Revolution, and I was able to wear it on my uniform. I was proud of this. But the other thing that happened was that I was the only cadet at the end of this year not to be promoted. So I went to my battalion commander, and I asked him about why I'd been awarded but not promoted. And he told me that he was trying to reinforce an idea in me that although I had certain skills in military training and in academics or dedication to the unit and the idea of officer training. He didn't berate me like the colonel from West Point, but he was trying to instruct me in something. And so I thought about it, and I went and I talked to one of my other officer mentors, a man who I had a little bit more intimate relationship with, and he tried to convince me to walk away, to pursue other things. He thought that I had other talents and gifts, and that there are many ways to serve a country. The military is simply one of them. That maybe I should choose those other paths. And so, I still wasn't sure what I thought about that. Because when my grandfather died, I put a West Point patch in his coffin. And the idea of becoming an officer was still incredibly important to me. And so I thought, well, maybe I just, I had a bad experience at West Point, I had a bad experience at Iowa, maybe I just need to go to a different school, like a different ROTC program. So I looked into going to different schools, and I applied to UC Boulder, which has a really good ROTC program. They couldn't offer me a scholarship for that year, and so I looked into some other schools in the area, and I landed upon a small Christian college in West Denver that my sister was a graduate student at. And they offered me an academic scholarship, which could buy me some time until, is this one still? There's, no. Okay. Doesn't like me. Hello? Okay. So, while I'm waiting for a slot to open at UC Boulder, I go to this small Christian college in West Denver, and lo and behold, the president of this university is a man named Larry Donathorn, who is a West Point graduate and a philosophy professor. And I spent lots of hours in his office. I had another professor there that year who started asking us some questions, things about nationalism and patriotism, and if there was potentially an instance where allegiance to an institution, to a group of people, could ever come into conflict with allegiance, say, to the kingdom of God, or it's allegiance to humanity, perhaps, and your duties to your fellow man, and what you're supposed to do as a person of conscience in those situations. So I started thinking about these ideas a lot. I started talking to Dr. Donathorn about them. And at the end of this year, I became convinced that I wanted to go on and study philosophy. And there was only one philosophy professor at the school, so I just decided to test my chips back at the University of Iowa again. But before I came back to Iowa to finish my degree, Dr. Donathorn sat me down, and he said the exact same thing that the officer from Iowa said. He said, "Joshua, I think that you have other things that you might be able to succeed at. And there are lots of ways to serve a nation, to serve a people. Maybe you ought to pursue those avenues." So this time I finally decided to take their advice. And I went back to the University of Iowa and just became a college kid. And I had a really good time doing it. But in the midst of having a good time being a college kid, I started getting letters from a recruiter in Des Moines, Iowa, saying that Congress was restructuring what's called the inactive ready reserves, which is how I was classified at that time. And the document stated that all inactive reservists were going to get involuntarily reactivated. And they had to re-enlist, all of us had to re-enlist, choose a job, or that would happen for us. They would choose a job for us and bring us back in involuntarily. So I started thinking about what my options were. Started thinking about the fact that once upon a time I'd signed a contract, that I'd sworn an oath. But I didn't act too quickly on it. I was still just thinking this through. But then 9/11 happened. And I got a flood of phone calls, friends asking if I was getting deployed, getting sent to Afghanistan. And I said, no, I'm just a name on a computer screen. I'm not going anywhere. But the letters from the recruiter kept on coming as well. So I started looking into it and getting kind of scared, thinking I don't want to get put into a job that I don't want to do. Maybe if I have to go back into the Army, at least I can get a skill out of this. So I looked into becoming a linguist. And the only job that guaranteed language training was an interrogator. And I wasn't thrilled about that idea. You know, I'd seen Law and Order and The Deer Hunter and The Swinging Light and cigarettes, and you know, it didn't sound very appealing to me. But another thought crossed my mind, which was, maybe it's good to have people who are a little bit more ethically sensitive about certain issues, who are a little bit worried about what's going on. Maybe it's good to have those kind of people in those kinds of situations to make sure that those jobs are done ethically. So I decided that maybe I could go ahead with this. And I started talking to recruiters in Iowa City, where I was living at the time, and decided I was going to go ahead and go back in. That as much as I had problems with this idea of a war on terrorism, I wasn't exactly sure what that meant. We weren't declaring war against Germany or something. That was very ambiguous to me, but I didn't really have an alternative. I didn't really know what I was going to do if not fulfilling my duties. So I re-enlisted, but a week before I re-enlisted, I found out that all of the letters that the recruiter in Des Moines had sent me were fraudulent. That he had taken a memo written by a general, used it out of context as a recruitment ploy to boost numbers. So for 1 week before I re-enlisted, I was free to make a decision. I wasn't compelled to come back in, although I was thinking that perhaps these kinds of policies would eventually get put into law, even if this guy was, lying and sending a lot of people off to war needlessly. One thing that happened that year, which was the whole controversy over George Bush's service record with the National Guard. And I thought to myself, Joshua, you're a privileged, upper-class white kid at a school who gets to do privileged things. You have a chance to walk away from your duties, and maybe nothing will ever happen for it, but do you really want to be that guy? And I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the person who just used my privilege in order to escape things. And I didn't really have an answer to the problem. I didn't have an alternative solution. And so simply as a matter of fulfilling my duties, I decided to go back in. When I went back on active duty, my two best friends went to graduate school. And they went to Duke Divinity to study theology under a man named Stanley Hauerwas, who's a very well-known Protestant pacifist. So my buddies were off studying philosophy and theology and doing all sorts of things that I wish I was doing, while I was strapping on combat boots again and learning how to interrogate people. I wasn't too happy with them. But the interrogator school was actually a little bit encouraging to me at the beginning. The easiest way to fail a mock interrogation is to break the Geneva Conventions. And they held that rule pretty tightly. And I thought, well, this is good, this is helping me out. I'm not being told to do things I don't agree with. But another thing happened during the interrogator school, which was I was pretty good at it. And I was pretty good at getting into the character of an interrogator. And feeling the rage of what it's like to be an agent of justice. When you've got in the schoolhouse, you're given a file that tells you who your mock detainee is. And it tells you all of his crimes. And there's no question about it. There's no ambiguity. It's a mock scenario, and so what the file says is true. There's no ambiguity about whether or not this person actually committed what they've been accused of. You just take it as fact. And so you have this righteousness of cause, and you're entitled because this person committed genocide. And that was really the first time in my life I had ever been in a situation where I felt that kind of power. And I felt the kind of rage where you feel okay about it.
Imagine a place where we sit back, laughing and bragging about the times that we carried, the magnum of passion that we had towards all the negative action. The drugs became my fatal attraction. For the moment, but I'm hoping we can overcome. Victory is ours when all is done. You just have to warn it, man, don't be dumb. Imagine a narrow place very deep in the clouds where you're welcome, even greeted with smiles. Free above the sea for thoughts we defeated all the evil laws building ourselves. So I believe in those who tell me the truth. Imagination to reality, my heart in this booth. Every day till the day that I'm through, I'm going out like a man and keeping my head high where I rightfully stand. I gotta do it. Maybe I can show you better through the rhythm of this music. Listen up, cause if I did it, then I show you know that you could do it too.